Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to talk about ventricular system of the central nervous system. What is ventricular system? Ventricular system is the system which is made from the cavities from the ventricle and the cerebral spinal fluid. Ventricular system consists of ventricles and cerebral spinal fluid. What is ventricle? Ventricle are the cavities. Ventricles are the cavities in the brain which is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. As we know that our brain consists of many parts, diencephalon, telencephalon, thalamus, hypothalamus, hindbrain, midbrain. So these are the masses of the tissues. But our brain have cavities. Our brain have channels for the nourishment, for the getting of the nutrition. So our brain are the masses of the tissues, so they need to get some nutritional uh, substances. So these nutritional substances are get by the brain with the help of the specific cavities which is called the uh, ventricles. Ventricles are filled with cerebrospinal fluid, and cerebral spinal fluid. I am not going on detail for the cerebral spinal fluid because I have already uploaded a detailed class, and for the formation, circulation, absorption, function of the cerebral spinal fluid. So cerebral spinal fluid, as you know, that consists of nutrition for the brain. So ventricles are the fluid filled. Ventricles are the cerebrospinal fluid filled cavities and the CNS, and these cavities are lateral ventricles. Lateral ventricles are two in number. Lateral ventricles, third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle. This is the front cut view. These are the masses of the brain, as you can see here. These are the masses of the brain. These are the lateral ventricle. This is the cerebral aqueduct, third ventricle, fourth ventricle. This is the anterior cut section of the brain. Okay, this is the lateral cut section. As you can see here, this is the lateral cut section. This is the brain mass. This is the cerebrum. This is the cerebrum, while this one is the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum. This is the lateral ventricle, third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, and fourth ventricle, and the central canal of the spinal cord. Okay, the yellow color are the cavities. This is the lateral cut section. This is the front cut section, while this one is the whole structure. This is the brain mass. This is the lateral ventricle. This is the suppose this is the this one green color is the right lateral ventricle. This is the left lateral ventricle. This is the third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle. For easy understanding, look at this one. This anterior section, anterior cut. Our brain consists of two lateral ventricle. These are the lateral ventricle. One third ventricle. This one is the third ventricle, yellow color. While this is the cerebral aqueduct. While this one is the fourth ventricle, and this one is the central canal. What is lateral ventricle? Lateral ventricle are two in number. These are the part of the diencephalon. These are the part of the cerebrum. Lateral ventricle are two in number. Each cerebrum consists of one lateral ventricle. This is the right cerebrum. So the right cerebrum consists of the right lateral ventricle. This one is the left cerebrum. The left cerebrum consists of the left lateral ventricle. So lateral ventricle are the cavities and the cerebrum. This cover the cerebrum. These are the cavities and the cerebrum uh, and the cerebrum. Okay. Lateral ventricle consists of a structure which is called choroid plexus. Choroid plexus are the structure which produce cerebral spinal fluid. This is I am not going in detail for the formation of cerebral spinal fluid, but this is the structure in the lateral ventricle which produce cerebral spinal fluid. Lateral ventricle again consists of anterior horn, posterior horn, body, and the look at this one. These are the lateral ventricle. This is the whole mass of the brain. This one is the green color is the left is the right lateral ventricle, which is behind. This one is the right lateral ventricle, while this one is the left lateral ventricle. This is the frontal side. Eye is present here. This is the frontal side. Frontal side. This is the frontal side, while this is the cerebellum. This is the posterior side. Whole mass of the brain. This one, as you can see here, which is this is the lateral ventricle. This one is the right lepto. This is the right lateral ventricle. This is the left lateral ventricle. The ventricle, the lateral ventricle communicate with the third ventricle. This is the third ventricle with a specific foramen, which is called, this is the specific foramen. This foramen is called foramen of Monro or interventricular foramen. Look at this diagram. This is the superior. This is the superior view. This is the superior view of the ventricular system. The yellow color, this one is called the lateral ventricle. This is the here is the opening. Here is the opening. Okay. This one is called, the yellow color is the lateral ventricle. This one is the right lateral ventricle. This one is the left lateral ventricle. This part of the lateral ventricle is called the body. The body cover the parietal lobe. The parietal lobe. This one is the body. This is the body part. This cover the parietal lobe of the brain. While this one is the anterior horn. Anterior horn cover the frontal lobe. This is the anterior horn, the frontal lobe of the cerebrum. This one is the posterior horn. Posterior horn cover, this is the posterior horn. Posterior horn cover the occipital lobe of the cerebrum, while the inferior horn, this is the inferior horn. This is the inferior horn. This inferior horn cover the temporal lobe of the cerebrum. As we know that cerebrum consists of frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe. So these four lobes are these four type of lobe are covered by the each part of the lateral ventricle. Okay, this is the lateral ventricle. Lateral ventricle is the part of the cerebrum. This ventricle cover the whole cerebrum and nourish the whole cerebrum with the help of the cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, this one. But this is the lateral ventricle. This is the cut section. This is the anterior cut longitudinal cut section. Okay, the lateral ventricle communicate with the third ventricle. This is the lateral ventricle. Lateral ventricle. This one is the third ventricle. This foramen is called foramen of Monro. Foramen of Monro. This is the foramen of Monro, which communicate with the third ventricle. Okay, third ventricle, lateral ventricle consists of the choroid plexus. Choroid plexus produce cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid is go to the third ventricle with the help of the foramen of Monro. Here, the foramen from the third ventricle, the cerebral spinal fluid is go to the. I am not going in detail for the circulation of the cerebral spinal fluid. From the third ventricle, the cerebrospinal fluid is go to the cerebral aqueduct. This is the cerebral aqueduct. Cerebral aqueduct. What is third ventricle? Third ventricle is the part of the telencephalon is the part of the diencephalon. Lateral ventricle is the part of the cerebrum, the diencephalon. But this is the sorry, I am so sorry. Cerebrum is the part of the telencephalon, while the thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, amygdala, hippocampus, these are the part of the diencephalon. So third ventricle is the part of the telencephalon, is the part is the part of the diencephalon. So the third ventricle nourishes the diencephalon. Okay, as you go near to the spinal cord, this is the cerebral aqueduct. What is cerebral aqueduct? Cerebral aqueduct is a narrow cavity, is a narrow structure which is connect the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle. This is the fourth ventricle. This one is the fourth ventricle. So cerebral aqueduct. The third ventricle and the lateral ventricle is the part of the forebrain. The cerebral aqueduct is the part of the midbrain. This is the part of the midbrain. Okay, cerebral aqueduct is the part of the midbrain. This one is the fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle is the part of the hindbrain. As you can see here, this is the bone, this is the medulla, this is the bone, and this is the medulla cut section. While the cerebellum is present posteriorly, back side, and this side. This is the cerebellum, and these are the bone and the medulla. So fourth ventricle are the cavities. Fourth ventricle is the cavity which is 1 in number. This is the cavity of the hindbrain. The fourth ventricle, half of the fourth ventricle is found by the bone, while half of the fourth ventricle is found by the medulla. Okay, look at this one. Suppose this is the bone, this is the medulla, this is the cerebellum, while this is the fourth ventricle. Okay, look at this one. Look at this diagram. This is the fourth ventricle. Okay, this is the fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle communicate with the subarachnoid space. This one is the green color is the pyometer. This is the pyometer. This is the arachnoid meter, while this is the durameter. Pad, P-A-D, fat, pyometer. This one arachnoid meter, durameter, while this one is the subarachnoid space. So the cerebral spinal fluid is produced here, circulate there, and go out from the cavities to the subarachnoid space with the help of the specific foramen. This foramen is called, as you can see here, foramen Leschke on the lateral side. This is the foramen Leschke. This is the cut section. This is the cut lateral view. Foramen Leschke are 2 in number, and laterally this is the foramen 2 in number. This is foramen 1, foramen 2. So these are the foramen Leschke which is present on lateral side. This is toward the one ear and another ear, toward the ear, toward the outside laterally. This is called the foramen Leschke. This is called the foramen Leschka. While this foramen is called the foramen Magendie. Foramen Magendie is toward the cerebellum. As you know that cerebellum, this is the cerebellum. So the foramen Leschke is toward the cerebellum. This is go toward the cerebellum. These are the foramen Leschke. This is one laterally, and other foramen Leschke is also laterally. But the foramen Magendie is toward the cerebellum. Okay, so the cerebral spinal fluid is go toward the subarachnoid space with the help of foramen Leschke and foramen Magendie. Then, as we know that spinal cord is also a mass of the nervous tissue, so it also need nutrition. So The cerebrospinal fluid is go to the, this is the spinal cord, this is this one, this is the spinal cord, this is the central canal of the spinal cord. So the central canal of the spinal cord is also filled with the cerebrospinal fluid. At the inferior end, spinal cord has a swollen structure which is called terminal terminal ventricle. Terminal ventricle is the end point, is the swollen, is the wide area of the spinal cord. So the what is ventricle? What is ventricular system? Ventricular system, as you can see here, this is the this one is the the cerebral aqueduct. This is the cerebral aqueduct. This is the port ventricle. This is the this is the central canal. Okay, of the spinal cord. What is ventricular system? Ventricular system is a series of the ventricle which is consist of the cerebrospinal fluid and the cavities and the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, this is all about the ventricular system. This one is the cut section. Remember this point. This is the cut section. Okay, while this one is also the cut section. This is the anterior cut section. This one is the lateral cut section. This is the frontal side, and this is the posterior side. This is the cerebellum. Do not confuse with the cerebrum. Okay, so this is the lateral ventricle, third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle, central canal. Okay, this is the foramen lesti, foramen medulla. Okay, while this one is the whole structure. This is the right, this is the frontal side, posterior side. This is the right lateral ventricle, left lateral ventricle. So they communicate with the this one is the third ventricle. This one is the behind this one. This is the behind this one. Here is, you not see this one. This is because the cerebral aqueduct is behind this inferior horn as the cerebral aqueduct, while this one is the fourth ventricle, and this is the central canal. Okay, so these are all about the